It was a night that I thought would be perfect. I had spent the past 3 months meticulously planning Logan's 35th birthday dinner at La Bernardine, one of the finest restaurants in the city. The kind of place you go when you want to show the world that you've arrived. And that's exactly what Logan wanted. It had to be perfect. The guest list, 25 people, most of them strangers from his corporate world, but he insisted on impressing them all. And me. I just wanted to make sure that he had the perfect night. I was dressed in my emerald green dress, the one I thought would be a beautiful touch to this moment. I imagined his face lighting up when he saw how I'd put everything together, everything we'd built. The food, the wine, the decor, everything was planned to make him feel like he was the center of the universe. And for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, I was still at the center of his universe too. But as the night unfolded, something else became clear. The moment it all shattered. Logan raised his glass. He was about to make his toast. His speech. The one that would surely be about how grateful he was for the life we had built, how much he appreciated me for everything I did. I could already feel my chest swell with pride. This is it. This is the moment when he acknowledges everything. But then he turned. The toast was no longer for me. Instead, he raised his glass to Natalie, his coworker, his work wife, as he called her. My stomach dropped. To Natalie, the one who has been my biggest support through everything, he said, beaming at her. His voice held admiration, reverence. I felt the room's energy shift. Everyone clapped for her. I felt like I was fading into the background, invisible in my own life. I forced a smile, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. The laughter around me wasn't the kind I could share in. It wasn't the kind of laugh you share with someone you love. It was the laughter that comes when you're the joke. And it didn't stop there. The gift bag. The evening had barely begun to settle after the toast when Logan pulled out a small gift bag from beneath the table. For my actual wife, something special, he said, that practiced smile on his face, one that I used to love. I looked at the bag, trying to hide the unease that bubbled inside me. I reached inside and pulled out a black t-shirt. It had white letters that read, "Divorced and free." A joke. The laughter from the table was like a wave crashing over me. I felt my face flush red with humiliation. People looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I stared at the shirt, unable to move. The room erupted in laughter, except for me. I couldn't even bring myself to smile. It was like a gut punch I wasn't ready for, not here, not now, not after everything I'd given up. The walkout. I felt everything shift. I couldn't breathe. I didn't want to cry in front of all these people, but I couldn't stay either. I need to go to the restroom, I said, standing up quickly, my legs shaky beneath me. I didn't go to the restroom. I didn't even look at Logan. I walked straight to the exit of the restaurant, past the staff, past the laughing guests. I left. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Logan's name flashed on the screen, a name that used to feel comforting, familiar, but now only felt like a reminder of everything that had been stripped from me. I didn't pick up. It rang again, then again. I stepped into the cool night air, the harsh winter of Boston hitting my bare arms like an accusation. 87 missed calls. Reflection in the cold. I didn't know where I was walking, but I didn't care. My breath came in shallow gasps, my chest tight. Everything I had given, my money, my dreams, my time, had been for him. For us, or so I thought. This wasn't how a partnership worked, was it? I had spent every waking moment trying to make him happy, trying to make him feel supported. I sacrificed my art, my creativity, everything that made me feel alive for this. And this was what I got in return, a joke. I stopped walking, standing on the corner of the street, feeling the harshness of the world hit me from all sides. The cold wind burned my face, but it was nothing compared to the sting in my chest. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. I saw the string of missed calls, the messages, and as I scrolled through them, I saw something unexpected. "Where are you? We need to talk. Please come back." Logan's voice came through a text message, his usual calm demeanor now edged with panic. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. I thought back to everything, the way I'd put my soul into organizing this night for him, the way I'd spent the last 3 years pushing my own needs aside to make sure his life was perfect. How could I have been so blind? It wasn't just the shirt, the gift, the toast. It was everything. I realized something, standing there, alone in the cold. I had been paying for everything: our lifestyle, his career, our life together. Every single sacrifice I'd made had been for a marriage that was more about his success than our happiness. And now I was paying for my humiliation, literally and figuratively. I was done. But I had no idea how far this would go, how deep the betrayal ran, and what would happen next. I thought back to the first time I met Logan. It wasn't love at first sight, but there was something magnetic about him. He had this presence, a confidence that I admired, a charm that made everyone around him feel important. It felt like a promise. With him, everything would be all right. We built our life together from nothing. I was working 2 jobs while he finished law school, scraping together every penny we could. He had big dreams, bigger than anyone I'd ever known, and I believed in them. I believed in him. I believed in us. Flashback, early sacrifices. The early days were hard. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I remember the small apartment in the city, the one with peeling paint and mismatched furniture. Logan would leave for work in his ill-fitting suit while I stayed home, preparing dinner and planning our future. There were so many nights I stayed up late, mapping out our budget, making sure we could cover rent, groceries, and still have a little left over for the things that mattered. He'd tell me how much he hated the job he had back then, how much he dreamed of bigger things. So I helped him get there. I was the one who found the resources, who supported him through networking events and job interviews. I'd stay up late helping him revise resumes, prep for interviews, hold him when he felt like giving up. I sacrificed pieces of myself, my art, my passion, my friends, to help him achieve his goals. The subtle shift, materialism and disconnection. As Logan's career took off, so did his taste for luxury. It started with small things, upgrading his office chair, buying that sleek watch, then slowly, almost imperceptibly, it became bigger. Designer suits, fine wines, high-end dinners. We were living in a new world, but it felt different. It was no longer about us. It was about him. I still remember the first time he bought a car that cost more than my salary, a BMW. He came home with it one day, and while I wanted to feel happy for him, I couldn't ignore the discomfort that settled in my stomach. We had bills to pay, but he couldn't understand why I was concerned. "It's an investment, Avery," he told me, brushing aside my concerns like they were nothing. "This is the kind of car I need to move up in the world." And so I kept quiet. I never once questioned him. I told myself that this was all for our future. But even as his career flourished, something about him began to change. Flashback, the growing gap. In the beginning, we were a team. We worked together, each of us pulling our weight in different ways. But as time passed, I found myself increasingly isolated. Logan became busier. His job demanded more of his time, and I had to pick up the slack at home. I'd prepare his meals, run his errands, and make sure his laundry was done just right, perfectly pressed shirts for the man who didn't care to notice that I had stopped painting, that I had stopped living for me. I had turned into this perfect wife, the kind that made sure everything was just right for him. The house was clean, the bills were paid, his suits were always wrinkle-free. But when was the last time Logan did something for me? I couldn't remember, and maybe that was the problem. Flashback, the first signs of favoritism. Logan's growing success wasn't just about money, it was about status. The more successful he became, the more he surrounded himself with people who reflected that success. He started talking about his work wife, Natalie, as though she was someone who truly understood him. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just an inside joke between colleagues, but over time, it became clearer that their connection was more than just professional. It wasn't just about work anymore. It was about a bond that was more emotional than I was comfortable with. At first, I dismissed it as nothing. She's just a colleague. But when he started mentioning her in every conversation about how she gets him, how she's always there to help, I felt something dark stir inside me. It was subtle at first, this shift in attention, but then it was. I remember the first time Logan talked about Natalie to me in front of a group of people. He said, "Natalie always had my back. She's been my rock in this office." There was a spark in his eyes, something I hadn't seen in years. I tried to hide it, the pang of jealousy that squeezed my chest. I wanted him to look at me like that. But instead, he turned to me and said, "Avery, you're great too, of course. But Natalie, she's the one who really knows how hard this job is." That was the first time I realized something was changing, slowly but surely. The hidden debt, enabling Logan's behavior. As Logan's success grew, so did his appetite for things I couldn't afford. His hobbies became more expensive: golf, private dinners, trips to exclusive resorts. The more he spent, the more I had to pick up the slack. I became the one who covered the groceries, the bills, and the expenses that he hadn't thought to consider. But it didn't matter because we were supposed to be building a life together. At least, that's what I told myself. But the debt was mounting. I had to borrow money from my emergency savings to pay off his credit card bills. I started skipping meals to ensure he had everything he wanted. The sacrifices became so ingrained in my routine that I didn't even notice the toll they were taking on me. Not until it was too late. Flashback: the first family gathering. The first family gathering that really opened my eyes was a dinner at Logan's mother's house. It was supposed to be a small family event, a nice evening with his parents and siblings. But when we arrived, his mother handed me a check for $5,000 for Logan's birthday gift. I remember my stomach sinking when I saw the amount. Logan's family was rich. They were used to giving him everything he wanted, and I could see it in the way his mother looked at me when I said, "This is too much." She simply smiled as if it was a given. "Don't worry about it, Avery," she said. "Logan needs it." And just like that, I felt invisible again. Flashback: the price of silence. It wasn't just Logan who made me feel small, it was his entire family. They played their part in the perfect little show they had going, pretending that everything was fine, even when I knew I was drowning. They expected me to be the perfect wife, the one who kept everything together, without asking for anything in return. I played my part, I kept quiet. I supported him, paid the bills, did the work. And in the background, Logan continued to build his empire with Natalie, his work wife. But deep down, I knew I was paying the price. I was giving everything, everything, for a man who didn't even know how to look at me anymore. And that night, at the birthday dinner, it all came crashing down. I pulled myself back into the present. It felt like the weight of everything had come to a head. I could still hear Logan's voice, the way he looked at me like I was nothing more than an accessory to his success. And now, Natalie had become a fixture in our lives, a real partner. And me, I was just the one left holding the bag. I grabbed my phone. There it was again, the text from Logan. "Please, Avery, come back. We need to fix this. You know I didn't mean it." But how could I fix this? How could I keep supporting a man who didn't even see me? I had given everything I had, and it still wasn't enough. I thought about leaving. Leaving him, leaving this life I had built around him. And I wasn't sure if I had the strength to do it yet. But one thing was clear. This time, I wasn't going to let Logan's world continue to cost me mine. And I was ready to fight. The phone buzzed again. Logan's name flashed on the screen. "Please pick up, Avery. I need to talk to you." It had been hours since I left him at the restaurant, but I knew he wouldn't stop until I answered. The messages had been flooding in: apologies, excuses, and the ever-familiar manipulation. "I didn't mean it. I never meant to hurt you. Please come back." But the worst ones were the ones that made me feel small again. "You're overreacting. Come on, it's just a joke. Why do you always have to make everything so dramatic?" I couldn't breathe. My fingers hovered over the phone, my heart racing. What was I supposed to say? What could I say to a man who had broken me so completely? The night was still so fresh. The toast to Natalie, the gift bag that had felt like a slap to my face. Divorced and free. The words were seared into my mind, and no amount of apologies could take them away. But there was one thing I knew for sure: I couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine. Not anymore. I had put up with enough. Enough silence. Enough shame. Enough sacrifice. The confrontation. I couldn't stay silent any longer. After hours of texting, avoiding his calls, and trying to drown out the noise in my head, I finally dialed his number. What if he doesn't take me seriously? I didn't know what I expected, but it certainly wasn't the harsh edge to his voice when he finally picked up. "Avery," Logan said, his tone demanding, like he was entitled to my attention. "I need you to come back. You're making a scene. Everyone is still at the restaurant. People are leaving. You can't just leave like this." "I can't just leave." I repeated the words slowly, letting them sink in. "Logan, you humiliated me tonight. You've been humiliating me for a long time, and I'm done pretending I'm okay with it." There was silence on the other end. He probably hadn't expected me to say that. He'd been treating me like I was invisible, like my feelings didn't matter, like I was just another accessory in his life. But I was, not anymore. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is," he said after a moment, his voice softer but still dismissive. "It was just a joke. You know I love you, right?" I nearly laughed, though it felt more like a sob stuck in my throat. Love. If this was love, I didn't want any part of it. "I don't know what love looks like anymore," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "But I do know this. I've been paying for everything for years. I've been paying for you, and I'm done." He didn't respond right away, and for a moment I thought maybe he was processing what I'd said. But then I heard it, the shift in his voice. "You're being dramatic," he finally said. "You always do this. You make everything bigger than it needs to be. This is why we're in trouble, because you don't know how to take a joke." I was shaking now, but it wasn't from fear. It was from anger, from frustration, from years of swallowing my feelings to keep him happy. This wasn't about a joke. This was about control. This was about him getting to dictate the terms of our life, our marriage, and our happiness. "I'm not coming back," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done." I hung up before he could respond. The moment of clarity. I sat on the cold floor of my apartment, my phone still buzzing with incoming calls. The text messages from Logan kept coming in, but I didn't care anymore. He didn't get to control me. He didn't get to make me feel small. Not anymore. But as I stared at my phone, something else hit me, something I had known but never truly faced. Logan hadn't just taken from me emotionally. He'd taken from me financially. I had been financing his success. His fancy suits, his gym memberships, the expensive dinners, the trips he went on without me, all of it had been at my expense. I had sacrificed my savings, my own happiness, and even my family's well-being to support his dream of success. And now, I had nothing to show for it. I had never really looked at the numbers before. But now, with Logan's demands growing more and more extravagant, the weight of it all hit me. The dinners, the designer clothes, the vacations, everything had been on my credit cards, my loans, my hard-earned savings. I grabbed my laptop and logged into our shared bank account. The numbers were worse than I imagined. Logan had been living in a different reality, one where his spending knew no bounds. I scrolled through the transactions, my heart sinking with every swipe, every single charge. $480 for Logan's gym membership. $17,000 on clothing in the last 2 years. $3,000 for a family gift that I couldn't afford. $8,000 for his birthday dinner tonight. And then, buried under everything else, was a transfer to an account I hadn't seen before. It wasn't much, just a few $1,000s here and there, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. $3,000 to Natalie. I froze. Natalie, the woman who had been his biggest support. The woman who had received the toast, the praise, the attention, while I had been nothing but a silent figure in the background. The same woman he'd been transferring money to. I closed my laptop and leaned back against the wall, feeling the weight of everything crash down on me. I had known, deep down, that Logan had been using me for years, but seeing it all laid out like this, the betrayal was beyond anything I could have imagined. I stared at my phone again, my finger hovering over the screen. Logan had been calling incessantly, desperate to fix things, but I couldn't just go back, not to the same life, not to a life where I was nothing more than a stepping stone for his success. I had to act now. I didn't know where to start, but I knew that my life was about to change. I had to fight for something that I had lost long ago myself. And I wasn't going to let him, or anyone, take that away from me again. But as I thought about taking the next step, one thing lingered in my mind. How much was I willing to lose to finally break free? It was late when I finally allowed myself to breathe. The weight of everything I had learned, everything I had been too blind to see, was still settling in. I sat at the kitchen table, my laptop open, and in front of me the bank records, the credit card statements, the hidden transfers. $3,000 to Natalie. $3,000 transferred to the woman who had been Logan's work wife, the woman who had stolen his affection while I was stuck in the background, The woman who had my husband's time, his energy, his attention, his money. As I read through the transactions again, I felt like the walls were closing in. I had been paying for his lifestyle, his success, his image. And now I realized that while I was working, scrambling to make ends meet, Logan had been secretly putting aside money, money that should have been ours. I grabbed my phone, the screen cracked from where it had slipped out of my hand earlier that night. I stared at Logan's name again. He had been texting and calling me all night, each message more desperate than the last. "Please, Avery, come back. You're overreacting. It was just a joke. I never meant to hurt you." I felt sick to my stomach. It was never just a joke. It had never been just a joke. It had been a way for him to exert power over me, to keep me small, to keep me in this invisible role while he did whatever he wanted. I had been paying for everything, while he paid for nothing. Avi's inner war, the decision to confront him. But I wasn't ready for what came next. I thought I could face Logan and confront him about the hidden money, the manipulation, the power games. But the moment the thought crossed my mind, I froze. What would it mean to truly face him? I had spent so many years enabling his behavior. I had kept the truth buried deep down, excusing his actions because I wanted to believe that he loved me. But now, what had I become? I had put everything aside, my art, my needs, my own identity to be the perfect wife, the perfect support. And yet, I wasn't enough for him. I wasn't enough to even be seen in my own marriage. The shame started creeping back, but this time, I didn't push it away. I let it sit with me. How could I have allowed myself to be treated this way for so long? But I couldn't stay in this toxic cycle anymore. I had to confront him. I had to make him see the damage he had done. The night of the confrontation. It wasn't until the next morning that I found myself standing in front of Logan. I had hardly slept. The weight of everything I had discovered was too much to process in one night, and the sheer exhaustion from the emotional toll had left me feeling disconnected from everything around me. But there I was, facing him across the living room, the same space where we'd once laughed, shared stories, planned our future. It felt so foreign now. How had we gotten here? He looked at me, his face flushed, like he was expecting me to forgive him. Like I always did. "Avery, I've been calling you all night," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "I'm sorry. I know I messed up. You know I didn't mean it. It was just a joke, and you're taking it way too seriously." The words hit me like daggers. He was still minimizing it. He was still making me feel like I was the problem. "No, Logan," I said, shaking my head. "You don't get to minimize this. It wasn't a joke. It was a public humiliation. And I'm done pretending that everything is fine when it is." He stepped toward me, his hand outstretched as if he was reaching for something, me maybe, but I couldn't let him touch me. Not anymore. "You don't understand," he continued, his voice softer now, a hint of desperation creeping in. "You've been so upset. You don't know how much pressure I've been under lately. You think this was easy for me. We've been through so much, Avery." I could feel the anger welling up inside me. How dare he say that? I had been the one carrying everything. I had been the one to support him emotionally, financially, physically. And now he was playing the victim. "No, Logan," I said, my voice steady but cutting. "I've been carrying this entire marriage. I've been sacrificing myself for you, for us. And you have the nerve to stand here and tell me that you've been under pressure." I walked past him, packing the room as the weight of the realization hit me all over again. "I paid for everything, Logan. The dinners, the trips, your clothes, the car. I've been living paycheck to paycheck, selling my grandmother's jewelry to cover your bills, all while you've been hoarding money for yourself. You've been funding your secret account, transferring money to Natalie, and I've been too blind to see it." He didn't respond at first. He just stood there, staring at me like he couldn't comprehend what I was saying. "Did you honestly think I wouldn't find out?" I asked, my voice rising. "Did you think I would just keep pretending that you weren't taking from me, from us, all these years?" I looked him in the eyes for the first time in a long while. I saw the cracks in his facade, the mask slipping just enough for me to see the man underneath, the man who had no respect for me, no respect for the life we had built. "I'm done," I said quietly, my voice almost breaking. "This marriage, this lie is over." The final blow. He finally spoke, his voice cracking, his words laced with panic. Avery, please, don't do this. We can work through it. We've been through worse, we can fix this. I need you. I can't do this without you. I felt my heart tighten, but this time it wasn't because I felt sympathy. It was because I realized that the man who had just begged me to stay was the same man who had systematically destroyed everything I cared about. I shook my head again, my decision final. No, Logan, you never needed me. You needed someone to pay your bills, someone to fill the role of the perfect wife while you lived your life however you wanted. I've been invisible in this marriage for too long. He stared at me for a long moment, then something shifted in his eyes, a flicker of understanding, but it was too late. I'm leaving, I said. I'm filing for divorce. Logan's face went pale. He didn't say anything for a long time. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. You can't just leave me, Avery, he finally whispered, his voice a mix of disbelief and anger. This isn't the end of us. You'll regret this. You can't just throw everything away. But I was already walking out the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing: I was taking back control. I was no longer going to let Logan dictate my life. As I walked away from him, away from the life I had built with him, I could feel the weight of the past few years lift off my shoulders. But as the door clicked shut behind me, something new took its place. Fear. What would my life look like now? How would I survive without him? And more importantly, what would I have to sacrifice to reclaim my life? I couldn't stop shaking. My body, which had been running on adrenaline for so long, finally gave in. It had been hours since I walked out on Logan, hours since I made the decision that felt like it was ripping me apart, and yet nothing felt real. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. The drive was a blur. My thoughts raced faster than the car could move. The city lights blurred, blending into a smear of bright colors, but nothing could drown out the chaos in my head. How did I get here? How had it come to this? I had just told Logan I was leaving. I had made the decision to walk away from my marriage. It felt like the first time in years I had chosen me, my happiness. But now that the words were out there, the weight of them pressed down on me harder than I could bear. The physical toll. The pain started as a dull ache in my chest. I thought it was just the emotional exhaustion catching up with me, but it quickly spiraled. The ache spread down my arms, and soon, I found myself gripping the steering wheel harder, my breath coming in shallow gasps. When I parked the car outside the small clinic, I barely had the energy to step out. My hands were slick with sweat, my head spinning. I leaned against the door for a moment, trying to steady myself, but everything felt off, like I was on the edge of something deep and terrifying. I hadn't eaten much today. I hadn't slept in days. The stress had piled up to a breaking point, and now my body was letting me know just how much it had taken. The hospital room. I staggered into the waiting room, trying to remain calm, but everything was closing in on me. I barely noticed the nurse who asked for my information. When I got into the exam room, I collapsed onto the bed, my body still shaking. I had been through a lot these past few months, but this felt different. This felt like the breaking point. The nurse, a woman in her late 30s with dark brown hair tied up in a ponytail, looked concerned when she took my blood pressure. "I'm going to need to run a few tests, okay?" she said gently. "It's probably nothing, but given how you're feeling, we want to make sure everything's all right." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. The waiting. The tests were done quickly, but the waiting felt endless. My phone buzzed in my purse, but I couldn't bring myself to check it. I knew it was Logan. He wouldn't stop. He would keep texting, keep calling, keep demanding an answer, but I had no answers to give him. I sat in the sterile, white room, trying to breathe through the tightness in my chest. And then the doctor walked in, holding a folder of results. "Avery," he said, his voice warm but serious, "you're under an extreme amount of stress. Physically, emotionally, you're pushing yourself too hard. We're seeing some signs of exhaustion, and it's taking a toll on your body." I swallowed hard. Exhaustion. That's what I was: broken, worn down, invisible. My whole life had been this push and pull, trying to do everything for everyone else while completely ignoring myself. And now I was paying for it. The diagnosis: emotional and physical exhaustion. "The good news is," the doctor continued, Nothing's life-threatening, but I recommend taking a break, focusing on your health, and getting some emotional support. If you keep running on empty, you're going to crash." The words hit me harder than I expected. I was crashing. "How long do I need to rest?" I asked, my voice sounding small even to myself. "At least a few weeks. You're going to need time to recharge. You can't keep running at this pace." Weeks? I hadn't had weeks to myself in years. I didn't even know what that would look like. But I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't keep going the way I had been. The reality sets in, confronting the cost. I left the hospital later that afternoon with a prescription for anti-anxiety medication and a stern warning to rest. My body was wrecked. My mind, even worse. I'd spent so long prioritizing Logan's needs, his success, his world, and now I was realizing just how much of me had been sacrificed in the process. I went home to an empty apartment. I had taken the steps to leave Logan, but in the quiet of my space, I realized something. I hadn't just left my marriage. I had left behind the woman I once was, the woman who painted, who dreamed, who was. But I was still trying to piece together what me even meant anymore. The family call, the repercussions of the truth. As the sun began to set, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Emma. I hadn't spoken to her about everything yet, just that I had left Logan, that I was done with the marriage. I had been too afraid of her judgment, afraid she'd think I was being dramatic. She had always been the strong one, the one who had her life together. "Emma, I'm coming over. We need to talk." I had no energy left to resist. She was my sister, my best friend, the only person who had ever been there when I needed her. The family confrontation, a sister's love. Emma arrived an hour later, her face filled with concern but also a kind of quiet understanding. She knew something had been wrong for a long time. She was the one who had asked me 1,000,000 times over the years, "Are you sure you're okay?" And each time I had said, "I'm fine." But tonight, I was far from fine. She sat beside me on the couch, wrapping her arm around my shoulders. "Avery, talk to me," she said softly. "What happened? Why did you leave him?" I let out a long, shaky breath. "Because I've been invisible for too long. I've been drowning, Emma, and I didn't even see it." She pulled me closer, her voice gentle but firm. "You don't have to explain. I've seen it. I've seen you give up your life, your dreams for him, and I've watched him walk all over you, over and over again. I'm just glad you finally woke up." The tears I had been holding back for so long finally spilled over. I cried for the woman I had been, for the woman I had lost. I cried for the years I spent hiding my own truth. But more than anything, I cried because for the first time in so long, I wasn't alone. But as the tears subsided, I pulled away and wiped my face. "Emma," I said, my voice raw, "there's something I found, something that I don't think I can just walk away from." I hesitated before pulling out my phone and showing her the bank statements, the hidden transfers, the amounts Logan had been secretly setting aside. She stared at the screen, her face paling. "Avery," she whispered, "this isn't just about him. This is about what he's done to you. This is financial abuse." I nodded, the weight of the truth crushing me. He had taken everything. He had used me, and now I had to fight to take it all back. The next few days felt like a blur. I stayed in my apartment, recovering from the emotional and physical toll of everything that had happened. I couldn't remember the last time I felt truly at peace. The pressure from Logan, the weight of everything I'd been carrying, it was all lifting. But at the same time, I was faced with something even more terrifying: the truth. I had spent years burying it, but now that it was out in the open, it felt like a brand new life waiting to be rebuilt, one that came with its own set of consequences. Logan hadn't stopped trying to reach me. His texts were desperate, guilt-ridden. He was apologizing, blaming the stress of his job, saying he didn't know what he was doing when he humiliated me. But each message was the same: the apology without the accountability, the excuses, the manipulation. I knew it was his way of reeling me back in, trying to maintain control of the situation. But for the first time in a long while, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: clarity. But the real storm was about to hit. Because, with everything I was learning about my marriage, I knew one thing: I had to expose Logan. I had to expose the financial abuse, the emotional manipulation, the way he had been using me for his own gain for all these years. The family fallout, a difficult choice. I knew there would be fallout. Family, friends, they wouldn't understand. Logan's family was already starting to reach out, their messages full of accusations. His mother sent me a long voicemail filled with disappointment, all because I had walked out on him, her golden child. They had never seen the cracks in our relationship. They had never seen the toll that Logan's behavior had taken on me. And now, as if everything weren't already falling apart, my phone rang again. This time, it was Logan's brother, James. He was the Golden Boy's biggest cheerleader, and it was clear from the start that he wasn't going to side with me. Avery, his voice came through the phone, calm but insistent. We need to talk. You can't just leave him like this. It's tearing the family apart. You know how much this affects Logan's career, his reputation. I could almost hear the undertones of judgment in his voice, like I was the one who had caused all of this. But what James didn't understand was that Logan had been tearing me apart for years, piece by piece, and I had finally found the courage to stop being his pawn. I'm not coming back, James, I said, my voice firm. Logan used me, and you all ignored it. I'm not going to pretend anymore that everything is fine when it's not. You can't guilt-trip me into staying in this marriage. I'm done. James fell silent on the other end. I could feel the tension, the disapproval, the frustration, but I stood my ground. I couldn't be their scapegoat anymore. I couldn't be his. Emma, the only one who sees. The hardest conversation came, as I knew it would, with my sister Emma. She had always been the strong one, the one who had her life together, who never needed anyone, and I had always relied on her, admired her. But now, I was the one who needed her. She came over that evening, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone. Emma looked at me, her face filled with concern but also something else, understanding. I showed her the bank statements again, the hidden transfers, the $3,000 to Natalie, all the secrets Logan had kept from me, all the money he had funneled away while I was left to pick up the pieces. Avery, Emma said softly, her voice full of quiet disbelief. You knew, didn't you? You knew something wasn't right. I've seen it in your eyes. I knew something was wrong, but I never saw the full picture until now. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I didn't want to see it, Em. I didn't want to believe that he could be capable of this, of using me like that. Emma leaned forward, her eyes fixed on mine. You weren't just his wife, Avery. You were his financial safety net. He made you feel small, like you didn't have a right to ask for what you needed. But you do. You've always had the right. I wiped away a tear that had escaped down my cheek, suddenly aware of how much I had suppressed for so long. How many times had I denied myself in the name of love? How many times had I justified his actions because I thought he was the one who needed to succeed? Well, Emma said, standing up, her expression hardening. I think it's time you finally fight for yourself. You've been paying for his lifestyle for too long, Avery. Now it's time for him to pay the price. The turning point, making it public. The next day, I made the decision to call a lawyer. Victoria Lawson. She was highly recommended. A tough, no-nonsense family law attorney who specialized in cases of financial manipulation and abuse. I'd heard of her before. She was known for her ability to expose hidden assets and get fair settlements in even the most complicated cases. I needed someone who would fight for me, someone who would hold Logan accountable for everything he had done. The truth wasn't just mine to bear anymore. It was time to make it public. Victoria was blunt and to the point. I can help you, she said after I explained my situation, but you need to be prepared for a long battle. Logan will try to fight this at every step. His ego won't let him just let go of this marriage easily. But I wasn't afraid, I was tired, and I was ready. The family stands in judgment. But as I began to prepare for the fight, Logan's family wasn't done trying to manipulate me. His brother, James, had reached out again, this time in person. He came to my apartment, standing at the door like some kind of salesman, trying to convince me to reconsider. You can't do this, Avery, he said, his voice quiet but insistent. You know what this will do to Logan, to the family. You're going to destroy him. I felt a wave of anger rise up inside me. No, I said, my voice steady. He's the one who's destroyed this family. I'm not destroying anything. I'm taking back what was stolen from me. James stood there for a long moment, his eyes full of disbelief. "You're making a huge mistake. You'll regret this." But I wasn't making a mistake. I wasn't the one who had lied, who had hidden money, who had taken advantage of someone's love and loyalty for their own benefit. I wasn't the one who had broken everything. I was just the one who had finally realized it. The next morning, I received a call from Victoria. She had news. "Avery," she said, "Logan's lawyer has reached out. They want to settle. They're offering half of the savings he's hidden, plus monthly support payments for 2 years." My heart dropped. I wasn't prepared for this. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It means he's starting to realize the weight of everything. He doesn't want this to go public, Avery. His reputation's on the line." For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of power. Logan was the one who was scared now, and this was just the beginning. But as I thought about everything that had led me here, the humiliation, the years of sacrifice, the emotional and financial abuse, I realized I was no longer scared. I was ready. The day the settlement papers arrived, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. Logan's lawyer had offered me half of the hidden savings, a monthly support payment for 2 years, and the assumption of all marital debt. But it wasn't just about the money. It wasn't about the cars or the designer suits or the lavish dinners. It wasn't even about the $3,000 transfer to Natalie. No, what I had truly wanted was something I didn't even know how to ask for until I found it: accountability. Logan had been given everything: a career built on my sacrifices, a life funded by my silence. And now, for the first time, he was being asked to answer for his actions. I sat in Victoria's office, my fingers tapping nervously on the leather arm of the chair as she went over the details. This was it. The end of one chapter, the beginning of another. But as I signed the papers, I couldn't help but wonder if I was doing the right thing. The end of the perfect marriage. I had spent years pretending to be someone I was. I had kept up the facade of being the perfect wife, the perfect partner, all while Logan's world continued to revolve around him. But I wasn't perfect. I was real, I was human, and I was done pretending. I thought back to all the moments I had spent trying to make our marriage work. The times I stayed up late, the times I picked up the pieces after he made his mistakes. I had given everything for this marriage, and yet he had never seen me. Not truly. And now it was over, but I was free. The divorce hearing. The divorce hearing was surprisingly civil. Logan had shown up, looking smaller than I remembered, no longer the confident man who had once made me feel like nothing more than a supporting character in his life. He looked disheveled, his suit too tight, his face pale. When he saw me, there was that moment of recognition, that flash of guilt. But instead of apologizing, instead of trying to win me back with words, he just stared at me. His eyes were vacant, like he had already written me off, like I wasn't worth his time anymore. I wasn't the one he needed to impress now. I could feel the tears rising in my throat, but I swallowed them down. Not today. Today wasn't for crying over the man who had spent years diminishing me. Today was for standing tall. Today was for reclaiming everything he had tried to strip away. When the judge called us to the stand, I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. The judge's decision, the real cost of love. The judge read through the terms of the settlement, and when the final decision was made, I heard the words that made my heart leap in my chest. "This divorce is granted. All marital property will be divided equally. Mr. Harrison will be required to pay monthly support to Mrs. Harrison for the next 2 years. He will also be responsible for all outstanding marital debt." It was over. The rebuild, therapy, and healing. After the hearing, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove to Emma's place. She had been my rock throughout this whole ordeal, and I needed to see her. I needed to feel grounded. When I arrived, she greeted me with open arms. No questions, no judgment, just warmth. "How do you feel?" she asked as we sat down on the couch together. "Relieved," I said, staring at the ground. "But also, I don't know, it's strange. Like I've lost something, but I've gained so much more. I don't even know where to start." Emma looked at me with such love in her eyes, it almost broke me. She didn't say anything at first, just squeezed my hand. And in that silence, I realized something: I was not broken. I had spent so long thinking I was the one who had failed. But the truth was, I had given everything to a man who didn't even deserve it. I had sacrificed myself to build a life that wasn't mine to build. But now, I was learning to build a life that was just for me. The path to recovery, the strength in rebuilding. Over the next few weeks, I started the hard work of rebuilding. It wasn't easy, not by any means. I started seeing a therapist, someone who helped me untangle the mess of guilt, anger, and confusion that had clouded my mind for so long. We worked through the trauma of living in a marriage built on manipulation and financial abuse. I learned to set boundaries, not just with Logan, but with everyone who had enabled him, who had made me feel small. And with every session, every conversation, I felt the cracks in the armor I had worn for years begin to heal. The mask I had put on for so long fell away, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the person I had been before all of this, the woman who painted, who created, who dreamed. The book deal, a new beginning. One day, while I was at Emma's apartment, my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen, confused. It was an unknown number, but something inside me told me I should answer. When I picked up, the voice on the other end was warm, professional. "Is this Avery Harrison?" I nodded, holding my breath. "This is Jennifer Wu, a literary agent. I've been following your blog and your story, and we'd love to discuss a book deal with you." My heart stopped. A book deal. I felt the tears well up in my eyes, but this time they were different. They were tears of joy, of relief, of pride. I had something to say. My story mattered, and I had the power to help others who had been in my shoes. The final piece, strength and independence. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I had control over it. My life was mine again. I had fought for my freedom, my dignity, and my future. Months later, I sat at a table in a cozy cafe, the manuscript for my book spread out before me. My hands shook as I typed out the final paragraphs. The title flashed in front of me, The Cost of Leaving. When I hit send, the weight I had carried for so long lifted off my shoulders. I was free. The day my book launched, I stood at the front of the room, the first chapter of my life behind me, the second chapter just beginning. I shared my story with a room full of women who had experienced the same thing. Women who had felt small, invisible, unworthy. But as the book sold, as the words reached more and more people, I realized something. This wasn't just my story. It was a story shared by thousands of women. And for the first time, I felt proud. Proud of who I was, proud of how far I had come, proud of the women who were now stepping into their own power alongside me. The chapter with Logan was closed. And the next chapter, it was all mine. Sometimes, the hardest moments of your life are the ones that teach you who you really are. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from something that was breaking you? How did you find the strength to rebuild your life? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more empowering stories like this one.